Howdy y'all. Welcome to Air Gun Sunday. Today we are going to be talking about some air guns. We're not going to do any shooting or anything. No new gun or anything like that. We got a question from a viewer, good friend of mine, and a long-time subscriber to each other. He just recently changed his name. It was M1A1 Abram Tank, and now it's Tactical Rabbit 308. He asked a question, so I told him I would answer the question in a video because it's too long to try to answer it in a comment. So he asked, which type of air gun has the most consistent pressure and the most consistent velocity? So, and the pros and cons of each. Basically, he asked, PCP, brake barrel, or CO2. Well, he left out pumpers, so we're gonna include that in this video today too. And we're going to do those first, matter of fact. So, I've got a couple pumpers. This typical, everybody knows the Benjamin 392. Very consistent if you maintain them, and that's the key to all of these guns, is you got to maintain them. They're all got seals in them. They unlike powder burners where you got to get that perfect powder, in which you still never get the dead nut perfect velocities. Seals leaking on it, whether it's minute or not, can affect your velocities. But this pumpers, if you pump it 10 times, more than likely you're going to get within, I'm going to say a 10 feet per second average difference, maybe even less, but very, very consistent to me. And you can adjust your velocity by only pumping it 5 times. Or some of the other guns, you can't do that. I mean, it's one velocity, that's it. So there's my take on the pumpers. Usually the next thing a lot of people use after pumpers is CO2. So I've got 2 of them out here to represent CO2. First one is this Crossman 2300. Everybody knows the 12-gram CO2 cartridge. It CO2. I've done a video on it a while back. CO2 is temperature sensitive. Like today, it's a nice cool day here in Texas finally. Oh God, it's only supposed to hit 70 today. It's really nice out today. Clear skies. Anyway, temperature sensitive. In other words, you're shooting in a 90-degree day and you got your zero dead on. Come winter time, good fall day, and you decide to do some rabbit hunting. So you grab the sucker and you go out there and you see a rabbit and you shoot him, and it shoots low. It's because it's cold. So the pressure's lower in these things. CO2 is self-regulating on its pressure. colder it is, the less pressure it has. The higher, warmer it is, the more pressure it's got. So with that too is every time you shoot it and a little bit of that CO2 escapes, it cools down. And it depends on whether your gun's a sipper or a gulper. You know, this gun's been highly modified. It gulps. It don't get 20, 30, or 40, 50, 60 shots out of one of these. It only gets about 20. It gulps. So if it gulps, then it's going to cool down more. But the thing is you can regulate that by how often you shoot. In other words, you shoot your first shot, you wait 30 seconds, or you wait 1 minute before you shoot the next shot. If you keep that consistent, then your shots should be consistent. But they're, it all depends on your discipline. The next CO2 one is this one. And this holds this 88 gram. You know, some of them say 90 grams, some of them say other things. Depends on the maker, but the basic design is 88 grams CO2. It goes right there. Basically on that, you're just going to get more shots. You don't get faster or slower or anything else. It's CO2, same velocities. So, what's the drawback on those things? CO2 costs money. So every time you pull the trigger and empty one of these, they cost money. Now you can go to most sporting goods stores and buy a pack of these. You know, you usually buy them in 5-pack, 10-pack, 20-pack, 40-pack. And obviously the more you buy, the cheaper they get. You can get off brands. A lot of these are made for like soda water bottle makers and brewer makers and stuff like that. They're a lot cheaper, but I think they're probably not as good as quality either. But anyway, these are very expensive. These things are like 20 something bucks maybe for a 2-pack. So, but you get a lot of shots out of these. You get several hundred on a sipper. You can get several hundred shots out of that. That's the drawbacks, the temperature sensitive and the cost of them. I didn't say about pros and cons on this. I guess did the pros. It can be consistent and it's variable on your velocity. The cons on it, how much do you want to do the pumping? So that's why you don't see a lot of people shooting these. They get tired of pumping on them. Let's go to brake barrels. Now I'm not a brake barrel guy, but I do have a underlever. Same thing as a brake barrel, other than that my barrel is permanently attached. When you take the brake barrel and cock it, there's a lever here that's pushing the spring down. They just separated the two, so you cock it right here. You got cheap brake barrels and you got expensive brake barrels. I mean, you can spend, you know, I want to say you can probably get a cheap brake barrel for $100, whereas you can get on up there the Air Arms TX200, which is one of the best out there. There's others that's pretty much equal to it, but the TX200 is, you know, it wins competitions and stuff, and I think it starts out $1,200 or $1,500, something like that. I can't remember, but you can get variations of it, and it goes up from there. A good one, you know, a good decent one, well maintained, good seasoned one, can shoot some very, very consistent velocities. Now we're not talking about pressures inside, because technically it doesn't have any pressure. It just you got a spring right here, you cocking it back, and basically when that spring slams forward, the air compression that it's doing shoves the pellet out the barrel. Now you got two types of springers, right? I want to say three types. You got the main brake barrel, and then you got the underlever. But you also have inside of here two different mechanisms. One's the actual spring, the other is the nitro piston. Basically the same thing as a nitrogen filled shock on your car. It's basically a small pit shock inside of there. Those reduce all the twang and stuff like that, and can be very consistent too. All this has to be maintained. Now you can take a gun, any of these older cheaper ones, and tune it to a point. You know, when you got cheap, you got cheap. So, but you can also tune these things, and if you know how to do them, this gun in particular doesn't need a spring compressor to get the spring out of it. Some of those other guns, you got to have all the tools, the right spring compressor to do it. Hey, be quiet over there. Hang on a minute. Okay, so tuning one of them, like I said, I'm not a brake barrel springer type guy. I know the basics of how to tune it, but I've never really tuned one, other than I did a little work on this one. You may need a spring compressor, you may not. You may need to get the springs, the ends on the springs. A lot of times those things aren't flat and square, so you need to make sure those are done. They build guide rods in it to keep that spring from, you know, when you compress a spring, it wants to bend, and if you put a guide rod in there, it keeps it nice and straight, so all the force it's using is going straight forward. The grease, don't just put some axle grease on it. That don't work. It takes some good grease. I've seen something similar to it, but I don't know if it is exactly the same as what they sell to modify springers. I've seen it in oil field type work. It's just it's almost tar, but I mean, you get it on your hands, you can't hardly get it off. It's sticky and nasty. Anyway, get too far off into that, but consistency. If you get one of these and maintain it, you can get very, very good consistencies with it. I've seen some of them shooting, you know, deviating 5 feet per second. You know, that's how good they can be. Depends on the quality of them and stuff like that. Okay, pros and cons. Cons, you got to cock it, obviously. You know, some of them, you ain't got the strength to do it, you know. The other thing to me is nothing's needed other than your gun. You know, you don't have to buy it. It's kind of like the pumpers. Once you got the pumper, that's it, you're done. This is the same thing. You don't need anything else but pellets. That's my take on the Springers. Springer, break barrels, whatever you want to call them. Okay. Next is PCP. You gotta be a drink here. We got the Sunday morning flyers out today. PCPs, pre-charged pneumatic. This one obviously is a I don't know. Let me reword that. This is a unregulated pre-charged pneumatic air rifle. You fill it with this port right here. Depending on the manufacturer's suggestions, guidelines, please pay attention to those. Don't overdo them. This one, I believe it says 2,900. It may say 3,000. I can't remember off of the hand with this one. Don't go over it. All you're doing is stretching your metals out and overworking things, and you know, being unsafe. So don't overfill them. I've seen people do that. Oh, look how much more velocity I get. You'd be buying a new gun or a new face because it blew up in your face. So anyway, this particular gun, I filled a 3,000. That's what I fill it to. I mean, that's what the gauge says on it. So, you know, this particular one has an adjustment on it for velocity. Some of them don't. Different features for different guns. Now, if this didn't have a adjuster on it, you would have 3,000 psi in here. Every time you pull the trigger, that pressure drops in that reservoir. But you got to understand what's going on inside, and I'm not going to get into all that. But once you tune one of these things, you can be very consistent on the velocities. I want to say this one, the way I've got it tuned, has about 20 psi or 20 feet per second from its start to its finish. So basically, it starts like at 880, and then in the middle of its peak, it does 900 and goes back down to 880, and it needs a refill by then. And there's ways to make that flatter, and we'll show you those guns here in a minute. Like I said, this is an unregulated version. Pros and cons on it. Support equipment. There's basically two ways to fill it. Three options, I guess, maybe you could say. First one is a hand pump. and it looks like a bicycle pump. For guns that only have a 2,000 psi feel, it's not too bad. I'm not using one of them myself. You know, I'm too old. Probably could use the exercise, but I'm not going to use a pump. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, the higher the pressure, because this one, like say, there's guns out there that hold 2,000 psi. This one holds 3,000. There's guns out there that actually hold like 42, even maybe 4,500 psi. You go to trying to fill those with a bicycle pump, you're going to get a workout. Shoot it, you know, 20, 30, 40 shots, and you're back to pumping again. So the next thing to do is jump up and buy you an electric compressor. They make some. I think there's one out there like 150 bucks. Attaches to the gun, turn it on. You got to pay attention because those cheaper ones don't have a cutoff on it, so you got to be there to, when it hits 3,000, turn it off. That's the next step up. Then you got the tanks, the portable tanks like the ones the firefighters use. That's basically what they are, just different sizes. To get those filled, you're either going to need a better compressor or a go somewhere to get it and pay to get it filled. There are some, if you live in a small town, maybe they sometimes have their own compressors to fill their firefighter tanks. You know, for a small donation to the fire department, they might fill it for you. It's just a thought there. Then once you have that tank filled, you can refill the gun however many times it'll do that. But that tank costs money. Once you have it though, it's, you know, no more cost. It's kind of like reloading. It's like once you have all your equipment to reload, it doesn't really cost you much more than the components itself. So can be very consistent, tuned correctly. You say this one has a variable velocity adjuster on it, some of them don't. So now let's get back to consistency on velocities. To make that one more consistent, you need to regulate the pressure. Now this is my own custom gun here. It's regulated. Bottom tank here, you know, I got it fit. I fill it to 3,000. The way I designed it, I should be able to fill 4,500, but I just don't do it. I get enough shots at 3,000 psi. But anyway, I'm using a paintball style regulator here, and there's manufacturers out there that do use that same type of system. The Umarex Gauntlet, it comes to mind to me, and there's a couple others out there that basically use the same thing. 3,000 here, but between the regulator and the valve there's a plenum area, and whatever you have your regulator set at, that plenum is at that pressure. This one happens to be at 1,700 psi right in there. Now what that does is, instead of the pressure on the tank regulating how fast it's going, the 1,700 psi in this one is regulating how fast the velocities you're shooting. Now this can be very consistent. I get maybe 5 total feet per second. standard deviation of 0. And this is, like I say, this is my custom gun. I just showing you this because this is one way that they regulate them. Benjamin Marauder. They make them in both versions, regulated and unregulated. This one happens to be regulated. And like I said, the regulator is setting right in here somewhere, and then there's a spot in here that holds the regulated pressure. Same thing. You can get very consistent velocities out of this one. Depends on the quality of your regulator, of how many feet per second you get deviations. So like I say, you can get this one. The original ones came out unregulated, just like this one. You can adjust it. There's adjustments on it to tweak it a little bit on both that one and this one, as far as the how much hammer pressure it's got and all that. But on this particular one, the regulator's set. You can't move it. I could take that regulator out and buy a aftermarket regulator that would go in here, and you can do that on a lot of your PCs. I can probably do that on this one too, is get a aftermarket regulator to slide down in the tube. And then to adjust, you can adjust it, but you have to take the gun apart to adjust it. There's some of the newer guns. I'm getting some skeeters on me. Some of the newer guns have an external screw that you can adjust to adjust the regulator to get the correct pressure you want. But same thing. This gun fills to 3,000 psi. It constantly goes down by the shots, but the pressure inside of the plenum area stays the same until you deplete the reservoir down to that regulator pressure. Get very good constant velocities with something like this. And like I said, there's a lot of PCPs out there that are unregulated that you can buy regulators to drop into them and change their characteristics really quick, you know, for the good. Drawback on something like that is, okay, that you're gonna have, you know, depending on how long the regulator is, if it's this long, and then how much plenum you gotta have. And I'm not gonna get into how big that's gotta be, but that much area you've lost in volume of reservoir air. So there's a drawback there. So yeah. So in a nutshell, CO2 costs you money because you got to buy the CO2 containers. There's some guns out there on CO2 that you can actually refill the bottle. So now you're going to have to go get a big bottle, take it, go get it filled, and then you can fill off of that bottle. You know, either way, it's costing you money to fill the gun, to shoot it. Technically, a CO2 is a pre-charged pneumatic. It's just using a different gas, and basically you have to pay to get it filled. Pumpers, again, can be very consistent. Got to pump them though. Brake barrels, Can be very consistent, but you got to cock them. Other than that, no outside assistance. If I was building a shit hit the fan gun, it's going to be a pumper. No, don't rely on nothing. I would build me a backpack type pumper. Brake barrel would work too. Is a good shit hit the fan gun. PCPs, they can be very, very consistent. Support equipment can cost as much, or if not more, than the gun itself, even if you only own one gun. But once you get that support equipment, you know, you can have multiple guns, and then they don't cost you any more to fill those because you've got the way to fill it. Just like I said, reloading. Once you have the equipment to do the reloading, you can reload for just about everything. You know, it just costs you the components. So, air compressor, a tank, stuff like that. You know, I've built mine up slowly over the years. So it's kind of spread the cost out. But if somebody wanted to get into this right now, all at once, you know, let's take this one, because this is probably the cheapest of all the ones I have out here. There's cheaper ones. The Diana Storm Rider that I just did video on, that gun's, I want to say 200. I can't remember how much it was, 250 maybe. And that would be a great gun to start out with PCPs, because it had a small reservoir on it. If you had to pump, it wouldn't be so bad. This is a $320 gun. You take a $320 gun, then you buy a good compressor that'll fill small tanks, but it has to be done in steps. You know, let it run a little while, cool it off, run it a little while, cool it off, you know, duty cycle type thing. That's $400 to $500. I think I paid $400 for mine. I can't remember. But and that's all you would need to fill the gun. Tanks probably start, a tank with the valve and the hose to connect it to this, I want to say they're going to start out at $300. So, you know, and they go up from there, and they, you know, that's a small tank. It'll probably get you 4 or 5 fills. You know, they're great for carrying with you hunting. You know, you hunt and you need a refill. That's great for that. Depends on how many shots you get per fill. This one gets 40. I don't know why you would need to refill a hunting unless you're, you know, maybe you're hunting pestin or something, and you're just hundreds and hundreds of birds, or, you know, ground squirrels, whatever. Then I can see it. But, you know, you go on squirrel hunting, it's like you're going to shoot 40 shots. You know, most areas you shot 40 shots and hit 40 squirrels, you probably doing a little illegal hunting there. So, yeah, try to end this video before it gets too darn long. I know it's already long, but yeah. I hope that answers your questions. So, you know, like I say, this a lot of my viewers they don't own air guns, and they like to ask questions. You know, and I know the air gun guys already know a lot of this, so pardon me on that part, but yeah, just trying to help a viewer out here and answer his questions. So hope I didn't bore y'all on Sunday morning this time, and thanks for watching.